Hey, traveler. Tonight, I thought we'd talk about medieval alchemists and their quest for gold. Where are you in the world right now, and what time is it there? Let me know in the comments. It's wonderful to know where our fellow travelers are joining us from tonight. What would you do if you suddenly had the power to turn lead into gold? For medieval alchemists, this wasn't just a fun thought experiment. It was the driving force behind their entire field. It's like if you had a universal remote, but instead of changing channels, you were changing the fundamental nature of matter. Ambitious, right? The lure of chrysopoeia, the art of gold-making, wasn't purely about wealth. It was tied to deeply held philosophical beliefs. Alchemists believed that all metals were essentially the same, just in different stages of perfection. Gold, being incorruptible and beautiful, represented the pinnacle of metallic existence. Think of it like leveling up in a video game, except instead of digital points, you're talking about transmuting base metals. Now that we've established the philosophical underpinning, let's get to brass tacks. The methods used were, well, let's just say they weren't exactly based on rigorous scientific principles. There were a lot of strange ingredients involved. Things like powdered unicorn horn, dragon's blood, and human urine. You know, the usual stuff you'd find in your pantry, if your pantry was stocked by a mad wizard. Speaking of strange ingredients, alchemy wasn't just about mixing things together. It was about transforming them. Many alchemists believed in the existence of the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance that could not only transmute base metals into gold, but also grant immortality. So it was basically the medieval equivalent of a winning lottery ticket and the fountain of youth all rolled into one. No wonder everyone was trying to find it. If they had, maybe we'd all be sipping elixirs and arguing about politics with Socrates. But what good is a philosopher's stone without the right techniques? Alchemists developed elaborate procedures, often involving complex apparatus like alembics and retorts. They would carefully heat, distill, and mix their ingredients, hoping to trigger the desired transformation. It was a bit like trying to bake a cake without a recipe, using only intuition and a vague sense of what might work. And sometimes they might have accidentally blown up their lab. From complex procedures to secretive language, alchemists often wrote in code, using symbols and allegories to conceal their secrets from prying eyes. This secrecy wasn't just about protecting their discoveries. It was also about maintaining their mystique and authority. After all, if everyone knew how to make gold, it wouldn't be worth much, would it? They spoke a mysterious tech-bro language of their time. Modern comparison? Today we have scientific methods and rigorous testing to guide our understanding of the world. But medieval people didn't have access to that. The difference was a lack of understanding of basic chemical principles. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but when your alternative was guesswork and superstition, alchemy suddenly looked brilliant. It was the best shot they had at understanding a very complex world. Key takeaway? The lure of chrysopoeia wasn't just about getting rich. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of reality and achieving a kind of perfection. The desire to control and manipulate the very fabric of existence, turning one thing into another, is a powerful and enduring human drive. Even if the methods were sometimes ridiculous, The underlying ambition was, in its own way, quite noble. If you've ever felt the urge to learn a new skill, master a new craft, or simply improve yourself in some way, you can understand the alchemist's drive. They just happen to be aiming a bit higher, like turn lead into gold high. Think of the alchemists as the early pioneers of scientific inquiry. They may not have always known what they were doing, but they were experimenting, observing, and documenting their findings. They were, in a sense, the proto-scientists, laying the groundwork for the development of chemistry and other scientific disciplines. It was like inventing the wheel, but instead of a wheel, they made a bunch of strange potions and blew up their labs. If you've ever felt frustrated by a lack of progress in your own endeavors, you can probably sympathize with the alchemists. They spent years, even decades, pursuing their goals, often without any tangible results. But they never gave up hope. They kept experimenting, kept learning, and kept pushing the boundaries of what was possible. It was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, blindfolded, while riding a unicycle. It wasn't easy, but they were determined to figure it out. Now that we've explored the philosophical underpinnings and the practical methods, let's consider the social context. Alchemy wasn't just a solitary pursuit. It was often supported by wealthy patrons who saw it as a potential source of wealth and power. Kings and nobles would employ alchemists in their courts, hoping to gain a competitive advantage over their rivals. It was like having a secret weapon, except instead of missiles, it was a formula for turning lead into gold. If your boss ever asks you to do something crazy for the company, remember you could be ordered to make gold. And the power structures of the time didn't hurt the development of alchemy. Alchemists held a unique position in society, straddling the line between science, magic, and religion. They were seen as both scholars and sorcerers, capable of unlocking the secrets of the universe. This gave them a certain amount of influence and prestige, which they used to further their research and promote their ideas. They were like the rock stars of the medieval world, except instead of guitars, they had alembics. But what happens when the gold doesn't materialize? The alchemists, when they did not reach their end goals, were not always successful, and their failures often led to disappointment and frustration. Some were even accused of fraud and charlatanism. But even in failure, they contributed to the advancement of knowledge. They learned what didn't work, which is just as important as learning what does work. It's like Thomas Edison failing thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. Every failed experiment brings you one step closer to success. Key takeaway? Even though they often failed, medieval alchemists laid the foundation for modern chemistry and other scientific disciplines through their experimentation and observation. From the noble pursuit to the potential for fraud, the story of medieval alchemy is a complex and fascinating one. It's a story of ambition, hope, and the enduring human desire to understand and control the world around us. It's a story that continues to resonate today, reminding us that even the most seemingly ridiculous endeavors can sometimes lead to unexpected discoveries. So the next time you find yourself awake in the middle of the night, wondering about the mysteries of the universe, remember the alchemists. They were wondering too, and who knows, maybe one day we'll figure out how to turn lead into gold. Though it would probably devalue gold pretty heavily, come to think of it.
The night whispers secrets, doesn't it? And perhaps you find yourself awake, drawn to the mysteries that flicker in the darkness. Let's delve into a world where the pursuit of gold wasn't just about economics, but about something far grander: the secrets of existence itself. We're talking, of course, about medieval alchemy. And tonight, we're cracking open the legendary Emerald Tablet. What if a single tablet held the key to the universe? That's the promise, or at least the allure, of the Emerald Tablet, attributed to the mythical Hermes Trismegistus. Forget your modern-day self-help gurus. Hermes was the OG. This supposed sage, a blend of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth, was considered the founder of Hermeticism, a philosophical and religious tradition deeply intertwined with alchemy. Think of him as the medieval internet's favorite search engine, but for ultimate wisdom. Now, the Emerald Tablet itself is cryptic, really cryptic. It's a short text, just a few lines, but packed with symbolism and veiled language. Translations vary, but a common thread speaks of "as above, so below," a principle suggesting a correspondence between the macrocosm and the microcosm. Essentially, what happens on a cosmic scale is reflected in our own lives and within ourselves. Imagine trying to build IKEA furniture based on instructions written in ancient riddles. That's about the level of frustration early alchemists faced with this text. But unlike assembling a bookshelf, the stakes here were perceived to be eternal. Speaking of cryptic, let's talk about the Hermetic secrets part. Hermeticism wasn't just about turning lead into gold. It was a whole philosophical system encompassing astrology, magic, and a quest for spiritual enlightenment. It posited that the universe was governed by hidden forces, and that humans could learn to manipulate these forces through knowledge and ritual. Think of it as the medieval version of understanding the algorithm, only instead of optimizing your social media presence, you're aiming for immortality and ultimate power. Now that we've dipped our toes into the mystical waters, let's consider a more concrete example. But what good is a cosmic blueprint without a goal? Enter the Philosopher's Stone, the ultimate prize of alchemy. This legendary substance was believed to possess incredible powers, including the ability to transmute base metals into gold and grant immortality. Imagine a universal cheat code capable of unlocking any potential. Medieval alchemists saw the creation of the stone not just as a chemical process, but as a spiritual journey, a process of purifying themselves along with the materials they worked with. It was the ultimate DIY project, with a potentially eternal payoff. The pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone fueled countless experiments, many of which, let's be honest, sound utterly bonkers to modern ears. They involved bizarre ingredients, think powdered unicorns, human blood, and copious amounts of urine. They used complicated apparatus, like alembics and retorts, to distill, sublimate, and coagulate various substances. And they relied on astrological timing, believing that the position of the planets influenced the success of their operations. If you've ever baked a cake and blamed the oven for your failures, you get the gist. From bizarre ingredients to complex processes, it seems ridiculous today, doesn't it? But hold on. Remember, these alchemists were operating without the benefit of modern chemistry. They were trying to understand the fundamental nature of matter, using the tools and knowledge available to them. They were pioneers, even if their methods seem misguided in retrospect. Sure, they didn't turn lead into gold, but their experiments led to important discoveries in chemistry and medicine. They laid the foundation for modern science, one failed transmutation at a time. Key takeaway? Alchemy was a proto-science, a blend of mysticism and experimentation that ultimately led the way for modern chemistry. Now that we've looked at the methods, let's appreciate the mindset. The beauty of alchemy lies not in its scientific accuracy, but in its ambition. It was a quest for knowledge, a search for meaning, and a testament to the human desire to understand and control the world around us. These alchemists were driven by a profound sense of wonder and a belief that anything was possible. We could use a little of that spirit today. After all, wasn't inventing the internet essentially a digital version of the Philosopher's Stone? Speaking of mindsets, medieval alchemists weren't just throwing random things into beakers. They believed in a hierarchical universe, with different substances possessing different degrees of perfection. Gold, for instance, was considered the most perfect metal, while lead was the least. The goal of transmutation was to elevate base metals to a higher state of being, to purify them and bring them closer to the divine. It's like the middle-aged version of extreme metal makeovers. The difference between modern chemistry and medieval alchemy lies not just in the science, but in the intention. Modern chemistry is primarily concerned with understanding and manipulating matter for practical purposes. Alchemy, on the other hand, was deeply intertwined with spirituality and personal transformation. The alchemist wasn't just trying to change lead into gold. They were trying to change themselves, to become more enlightened and closer to God. In a world without therapy, alchemy was a spiritual journey disguised as chemistry. Sure, the alchemists were often secretive and prone to exaggeration. They cloaked their work in symbolism and riddles, partly to protect their knowledge from prying eyes, and partly, let's be honest, to sound more impressive. But beneath the mystification, there was a genuine desire to understand the universe and our place within it. The alchemists believed that by mastering the secrets of nature, they could also master themselves. From misguided techniques to higher intentions, one could argue that even if their recipes were bunk, their passion was palpable. Key takeaway? Alchemy was as much about self-discovery as it was about scientific discovery, driven by a desire to understand both the material and spiritual realms. From self-discovery to the practicalities of surviving the medieval ages. Alchemy wasn't just about grand spiritual quests. It also had practical applications, or at least people hoped it would. Alchemists experimented with creating medicines, perfumes, and dyes. They sought to improve the quality of metals and gemstones. They even dabbled in the creation of artificial life, the legendary homunculus. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of biohackers, only with a lot more chanting and a lot less ethical oversight. But what good is an alchemist without a patron? Many alchemists were supported by wealthy nobles and monarchs who hoped to gain access to the Philosopher's Stone and its supposed benefits. These patrons often funded alchemical experiments in secret laboratories, providing the resources and protection needed to pursue their esoteric research. It was like the medieval version of venture capital, only with a higher chance of exploding the lab. The pursuit of alchemy wasn't without its risks. Alchemists often worked with dangerous chemicals and faced the threat of poisoning, explosions, and social ostracization. They were often viewed with suspicion by the church, which saw their work as heretical and potentially dangerous. So it was a high-stakes game, with the potential for both great reward and great peril. It's safe to say that even Netflix couldn't make a series this intense. Key takeaway? Alchemy was a high-stakes profession, but the potential rewards, both material and spiritual, were enough to attract a dedicated following. Now that we've explored the alchemists and their world, let's circle back to the Emerald Tablet. Even today, its enigmatic verses continue to fascinate and inspire. It serves as a reminder that the quest for knowledge and understanding is a timeless human endeavor.
The Emerald Tablet's promise speaks to a universal yearning for meaning and purpose. And maybe, just maybe, the real gold lies not in transmuting metals, but in transmuting ourselves. Remember, even today's scientists stand on the shoulders of these historical figures. From the Emerald Tablet's whispers to the fiery furnaces of the alchemists' laboratories, the story of alchemy is a story of ambition, ingenuity, and the enduring human quest for knowledge. So the next time you find yourself awake in the middle of the night, pondering the mysteries of the universe, remember the alchemists and their audacious dreams. They may not have found the philosopher's stone, but they left us a legacy of wonder and a reminder that even the most fantastical pursuits can lead to unexpected discoveries. Perhaps as you drift off to sleep, you might just dream of turning lead into gold. The Alchemist's Workshop, a crucible of chaos. Ever wonder what really went on behind the closed doors of a medieval alchemist's lab? It wasn't quite the tidy, organized science lab you might picture today. Think less sterile environment and more organized chaos. These weren't pristine laboratories with gleaming beakers. Imagine instead a dimly lit space, cluttered with strange devices, emanating a symphony of crackles, pops, and the occasional alarming boom. What could possibly go wrong? Let's step inside and take a look around. Dominating the scene would be the furnace, the heart of the alchemist's operations. Forget your fancy modern Bunsen burner. This was a roaring inferno, fueled by wood or charcoal, demanding constant tending. On top of this fiery behemoth sat the crucibles, earthenware or clay pots designed to withstand intense heat. These were the reaction vessels, where the alchemist hoped to coax base metals into yielding their golden secrets. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that seems pretty straightforward. But medieval ovens weren't exactly precision temperature controllers, more like a suggestion box for heat. Then there were the alembics and retorts, glassware used for distillation, essentially medieval stills. The alembic, with its bulbous body and long curved neck, was designed to separate volatile substances. The retort, similar in function, often had a spherical body and a downward-sloping spout. Imagine trying to assemble IKEA furniture after a few goblets of wine. That's about the level of precision we're talking about. These fragile glass contraptions were prone to cracking, leaking, and occasionally exploding, adding to the generally hazardous atmosphere. Speaking of ingredients, the alchemist's palate was a far cry from the periodic table. Mercury, with its shimmering, liquid allure, was a staple, believed to possess a transformative power. Sulfur, known for its pungent odor and flammability, was another key component, often associated with the fiery, destructive aspects of transmutation. Arsenic, highly toxic and deceptively beautiful, also found its way into the alchemist's concoctions. One shudders to think of the modern workplace safety violations. Imagine OSHA trying to inspect this place. But what good is equipment without something to experiment on? Medieval alchemists weren't exactly spoiled for choice regarding pure substances. They worked with what they had, often relying on impure minerals, plant extracts, and animal products. Imagine trying to bake a cake, but your flour might be contaminated with rat droppings. Your sugar is probably gritty sand, and your eggs, well, let's not go there. The pursuit of purity was a constant struggle, a Sisyphean task in a world where contamination was the norm. Key takeaway: the alchemist's workshop was a hazardous and unpredictable environment, a testament to both their ambition and their limited understanding of the natural world. Now that we've covered the general layout and equipment, let's delve into some of the more creative experiments they conducted. The goal, of course, was transmutation, turning base metals like lead into gold. This wasn't just about wealth, it was about spiritual transformation, about perfecting matter. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of trying to win the lottery while simultaneously achieving enlightenment. Ambitious, to say the least. One common method involved heating base metals with sulfur and mercury, hoping to somehow impregnate them with the qualities of gold. The alchemist would carefully control the heat, monitoring the color changes and hoping for a breakthrough. Imagine watching paint dry, but with the added risk of toxic fumes and potential explosions. Patience, it seems, was a virtue. Another popular technique was to create an elixir, a magical potion believed to possess the power to transmute metals and even prolong life. Recipes for these elixirs were often complex and cryptic, involving dozens of ingredients and elaborate procedures. Some recipes called for bizarre substances like powdered unicorn horn or the urine of a virgin boy. One wonders if anyone actually tried to find those ingredients, or if they just wrote it down to sound impressive. The alchemists would meticulously record their observations, often using symbolic language and secret codes to protect their knowledge. These alchemical texts are fascinating to modern readers, filled with allegorical imagery and obscure references. Imagine trying to decipher a cryptic crossword puzzle written by someone who was deliberately trying to confuse you. But what good are meticulous notes if the underlying science is, well, a bit off? The alchemists operated within a framework of Aristotelian physics and Hermetic philosophy, which, to put it kindly, wasn't exactly aligned with modern scientific understanding. They believed in the four elements and the idea that all matter was composed of a combination of these elements. They also believed in the existence of a fifth element, the quintessence, which was the key to perfection and transmutation. Now, I'm no physicist, but I'm pretty sure that's not how it works. Speaking of obscure beliefs, many alchemists also incorporated astrology into their work, believing that the positions of the planets influenced the success of their experiments. They would carefully time their operations to coincide with auspicious planetary alignments. Can you imagine trying to schedule a scientific experiment around Mercury retrograde? Key takeaway: medieval alchemists employed a wide range of bizarre and often dangerous experiments, driven by a combination of scientific curiosity, spiritual aspiration, and a healthy dose of wishful thinking. From alembics to astrology, medieval alchemy required both hands-on skill and a heavy dose of esoteric knowledge. But what was it really like to be an alchemist? The life of a medieval alchemist was often one of isolation and hardship. They spent long hours in their workshops, toiling away at their experiments, often with little to show for their efforts. They faced skepticism and ridicule from the wider community, who often regarded them as charlatans or madmen. Imagine explaining to your family that you're dedicating your life to turning lead into gold using unicorn horn. Good luck with that conversation. Many alchemists were also secretive and paranoid, fearing that their rivals would steal their discoveries. They often guarded their knowledge closely, sharing it only with trusted apprentices. The modern equivalent might be a tech startup fiercely protecting its intellectual property. Despite the challenges, alchemy attracted a diverse range of practitioners, from monks and scholars to artisans and entrepreneurs. Some were genuinely interested in scientific discovery, while others were simply seeking wealth and power. The motivations were as varied as the methods. The alchemist's quest for gold can be seen as a metaphor for the human desire for transformation and perfection. They were searching for something more than just material wealth. They were seeking a deeper understanding of the universe and their place within it. It's like binge-watching self-help videos, but with more explosions and toxic fumes. The legacy of medieval alchemy is complex and multifaceted. While their attempts to transmute metals ultimately failed, they did make significant contributions to the development of chemistry and other sciences. They developed new techniques for distillation, extraction, and purification, and they discovered new elements and compounds, by accident, usually. And while their theories may seem bizarre to us today, they were based on a sincere attempt to understand the natural world. They were pioneers, exploring the unknown with limited tools and even more limited knowledge. Key takeaway: the life of a medieval alchemist was a challenging but ultimately rewarding pursuit, driven by a desire for knowledge, wealth, and spiritual transformation. Their efforts, though often misguided, laid the foundation for modern science. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember the medieval alchemist hunched over their furnace, surrounded by strange devices and bubbling concoctions, dreaming of gold. Their quest may have been ultimately futile, but their spirit of inquiry and their unwavering belief in the possibility of transformation continue to inspire us today. Sweet dreams, and try not to dream of exploding retorts.
What whispers did the medieval alchemists hear in the dead of night, leading them down paths so unconventional? If you've ever tossed out expired leftovers and felt a twinge of guilt, imagine the medieval alchemist pondering the potential of, well, let's just say, less than appetizing ingredients. Long before the sterile lab environments of modern chemistry, these seekers of transmutation waded into realms that would make even the most seasoned bioengineer raise an eyebrow. We're talking about blood, urine, and other substances that most of us wouldn't dream of touching with a 10-foot pole. But hey, if you're trying to turn lead into gold, maybe a little sacrifice is worth it. Now that we've set the stage for the truly bizarre, let's delve into the specifics. Why blood? Why urine? The answer, as is often the case with alchemy, lies in a blend of practical observation, philosophical symbolism, and, let's be honest, a healthy dose of wishful thinking. Blood, the very essence of life, pulsed with a vibrant energy that seemed almost magical. Surely, if life itself could be contained within this crimson fluid, so too could the secrets of transmutation, right? Medieval alchemists believed that blood contained a quintessence, a fifth element beyond earth, air, fire, and water, which held the key to perfection. The purest, most potent blood was, naturally, the most sought after. Although, let's be clear, I don't condone any alchemically motivated blood drives. Speaking of quintessence, this brings us to urine. Yes, you read that right. That golden liquid, so readily available, was considered a valuable resource. Why? Because upon distillation, it yielded ammonia, a crucial ingredient in many alchemical processes. The alchemists of old weren't just being weird, they were being resourceful. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of recycling, albeit a much smellier version. And it wasn't just any urine that would do. The urine of healthy, preferably young individuals was considered superior. I imagine there were some very strange collection practices going on. But what good is blood and urine without a little animal intervention? Exotic animal extracts were highly prized, believed to possess unique alchemical properties. Think dragon's blood, powdered unicorn horn, and extracts from all sorts of creatures, real and imagined. The rarer and more unusual the animal, the more potent its alchemical power was believed to be. I mean, who wouldn't want to believe that a pinch of phoenix ash could turn your copper into gold? It certainly beats working for it. From blood to beasts, these substances weren't chosen arbitrarily.
Each was imbued with symbolic meaning, reflecting the alchemist's understanding of the cosmos and the interconnectedness of all things. The doctrine of signatures suggested that the appearance of a substance revealed its inherent properties. For instance, a plant with a heart-shaped leaf might be used to treat heart ailments. This idea extended to alchemical ingredients, where perceived qualities were linked to desired outcomes. Blood, with its vibrant red color and life-sustaining properties, was associated with vitality and transformation. Urine, with its golden hue, was linked to the desired outcome of gold itself. But medieval people weren't just relying on symbolic associations. They were also making observations about the chemical properties of these substances. The difference was that their understanding of chemistry was still in its infancy. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Now that we've explored the why, let's touch on the how. Transforming these ingredients into something alchemically useful was no simple task. It involved a series of complex processes: distillation, sublimation, calcination, and fermentation. Each step was carefully controlled, with specific temperatures, durations, and vessels. The alchemist's lab was a chaotic symphony of bubbling beakers, hissing retorts, and noxious fumes. And remember, these alchemists didn't have modern safety equipment. They were breathing in these fumes, handling these substances, often with little more than intuition to guide them. I think I'll stick to my Netflix subscription, thank you very much. But the most interesting part of these methods is the recipes. Some alchemical recipes sound like something out of a horror movie. Imagine a recipe calling for the blood of a virgin mixed with powdered mummy and distilled owl droppings. I'm making that up, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were real. And the ethical considerations? Well, let's just say they were different. In a world where survival was a daily struggle, the pursuit of gold often overshadowed concerns about the provenance of one's ingredients. Key takeaway? Medieval alchemy was a blend of science, magic, and wishful thinking, fueled by a deep-seated desire to understand the universe and transform the world. Now that we've covered the main ingredients, let's talk about the mindset of the alchemist. These weren't just mad scientists stirring potions in basements. They were philosophers, theologians, and natural scientists, all rolled into one. They believed that transmutation was not just a physical process, but a spiritual one. The alchemist had to purify themselves, both body and soul, in order to achieve the great work. Imagine the pressure of knowing that your own moral failings could sabotage your attempt to create gold. Speaking of moral failings, this brings us to the inevitable charlatans and tricksters. The promise of gold attracted its fair share of unscrupulous individuals, eager to exploit the gullible. These con artists would perform elaborate rituals filled with smoke and mirrors to convince their victims that they had successfully transmuted base metals into gold. Of course, the gold would quickly turn out to be something else entirely. Sort of like those infomercials that promise you'll lose weight while you sleep. But what good is a fascinating historical tidbit without a modern comparison? Today, we have sophisticated laboratories and advanced scientific techniques to understand the world around us. But medieval people had alchemy. The difference was, modern science is based on empirical evidence and rigorous testing, while alchemy relied more on intuition and symbolic interpretation. Sure, it wasn't always accurate, but it was a way to explore the mysteries of nature in a time when scientific knowledge was limited. When your alternative was ignorance, alchemy suddenly looked brilliant. And I think we could all use a little more wonder in our lives, even if it involves a bit of powdered unicorn horn. Yeah. In the quiet hours of the night, as we ponder the strange world of medieval alchemy, perhaps we can find a connection to our own modern pursuits. We too are driven by a desire to understand the universe, to push the boundaries of knowledge, and to transform the world around us. Maybe we don't use blood and urine anymore, but the underlying drive remains the same. After all, isn't every scientific breakthrough, every artistic creation a form of transmutation, turning ideas into reality? Key takeaway? Despite their questionable methods, medieval alchemists were driven by the same curiosity and desire for transformation that fuels modern science and art. And with that, we reach the end of our journey into the unsavory world of medieval alchemical ingredients. Sweet dreams, or perhaps alchemical dreams. The pursuit of gold, an obsession that has gripped humanity for millennia, took on a particularly curious form in the medieval period. Alchemists, often cloaked in secrecy and fueled by a blend of genuine scientific curiosity and outright delusion, sought to transmute base metals into the precious metal. But what if the pursuit of gold wasn't about the gold itself, but about something more? Now, let's talk about the perpetrators of this pseudoscience, the alchemists themselves. These figures, a diverse bunch ranging from learned scholars to outright charlatans, populated the courts of kings, the workshops of wealthy merchants, and the back alleys of bustling cities. Some were undoubtedly sincere in their belief that transmutation was possible, poring over ancient texts, conducting endless experiments, and meticulously documenting their findings. Others, well, they were just in it for the money. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of modern-day infomercial gurus, promising riches beyond your wildest dreams, for a small investment, of course. Speaking of investments, these alchemists weren't exactly operating on a shoestring budget. They needed equipment, alembics, retorts, crucibles, and a whole host of other bizarre-sounding apparatus. They needed ingredients, rare herbs, exotic minerals, and of course, plenty of lead. And they needed time, years, sometimes decades, toiling away in their laboratories. All of this required funding, and that's where the wealthy patrons, royalty, and gullible public came in. Kings, ever eager to fill their coffers, were particularly susceptible to the allure of alchemy. Imagine the possibilities. No more taxes, no more wars over resources, just an endless supply of gold, all thanks to the magical powers of alchemy. It was a tempting proposition, and many a monarch fell for it, showering alchemists with patronage and resources in exchange for the promise of transmutation. It was like the medieval version of investing in crypto, with even less regulation. But what good is patronage without results? Here's the thing. Transmutation, as we now know, is impossible using medieval methods. The alchemists, despite their best efforts, never actually managed to turn lead into gold. So how did they keep their patrons happy? Well, they employed a variety of strategies, ranging from carefully crafted excuses to outright deception. Some claimed that the process was almost complete, requiring only a few more ingredients or a slightly different technique. Others blamed their failures on impurities in the base metals or the interference of evil spirits. And still others simply vanished into the night, leaving their patrons to lick their wounds and wonder where all their money had gone. It was like the alchemist version of ghosting someone, but with significantly higher financial stakes. From kings to commoners, the promise of gold proved irresistible. The stories of alchemists and their miraculous transformations spread like wildfire, fueling the imaginations of people from all walks of life. Everyone wanted a piece of the action, and many were willing to invest their hard-earned money in the hope of striking it rich. It was a classic case of supply and demand. The alchemists supplied the promise of gold, and the public supplied the money to fund their experiments. Of course, the vast majority of these investments yielded nothing but disappointment, but the allure of instant wealth was too strong to resist, and the alchemical craze continued to sweep across Europe. Now that we've looked at the alchemists and their patrons, let's delve into some specific examples of these perpetrators of pseudoscience. One figure who looms large in the history of alchemy is Nicolas Flamel, a Parisian scribe who, according to legend, discovered the secret of transmutation after deciphering an ancient book. Flamel became incredibly wealthy, and many believed that he had achieved immortality thanks to his alchemical knowledge. Of course, there's no evidence to support these claims, but the legend of Nicolas Flamel continues to fascinate people to this day, thanks in no small part to his prominent role in the Harry Potter series. He's like the medieval version of a self-help guru, only instead of offering life advice, he's offering the secrets to eternal life, allegedly. Another notable alchemist was Paracelsus, a Swiss physician and alchemist who challenged the traditional medical practices of his time. Paracelsus believed that the body could be healed through the use of alchemical remedies, and he developed a number of innovative treatments. He was a controversial figure, often clashing with established authorities, but he was also a brilliant and influential thinker who made significant contributions to the fields of medicine and chemistry. Paracelsus was like the medieval version of a maverick doctor, challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries of medical knowledge. These are just a few examples of the many alchemists who populated the medieval world. Some were genuine seekers of knowledge, while others were simply con artists looking to make a quick buck. But regardless of their motivations, they all played a role in shaping the history of science and the human pursuit of wealth and immortality. Key takeaway: medieval alchemists, whether sincere or fraudulent, captivated society with the tantalizing prospect of instant riches and extended life.
From gold to atoms, alchemy's legacy. Ever wonder what it's like to chase a dream, knowing it might be forever out of reach? That's the essence of alchemy, as its star began to fade. But fear not, the night is young, and the story of alchemy's decline is a tale of slow transformation, not sudden collapse. For centuries alchemists toiled, driven by the promise of transmutation, turning base metals into gold, discovering the elixirs of life. Their labs, filled with strange concoctions and bubbling retorts, were cauldrons of both hope and delusion. But as the scientific method began to take root, alchemy's foundations started to crack. Now that we've discussed alchemists' dreams, let's talk about how those dreams met the harsh reality of burgeoning science. The problem wasn't a lack of effort. Alchemists were meticulous, often obsessive in their experiments. They meticulously recorded their observations, developed new techniques, and discovered new substances, many of which are still used today. The issue was their underlying assumptions. They believed in a world governed by hidden forces, mystical connections, and symbolic meanings. If you have ever watched them, you might realize these assumptions are quite bold. But what good is meticulousness without a correct underlying theory? As science advanced, it offered a different framework, one based on observation, experimentation, and mathematical analysis. Chemists, the intellectual heirs of alchemists, began to focus on the properties of matter, the composition of substances, and the laws that governed their interactions. The difference was akin to navigating by the stars versus reading a map. Both can get you there, but one is far more reliable. Speaking of more reliable methods, this brings us to the development of chemistry as a distinct discipline. Figures like Robert Boyle, with his emphasis on experimentation and observation, and Antoine Lavoisier, who revolutionized chemical nomenclature and stoichiometry, were instrumental in separating chemistry from its alchemical roots. When you can measure and quantify, you start to understand the limits of wishful thinking. Key takeaway: alchemy's meticulousness couldn't overcome its flawed foundation. Now that we've covered the rise of chemistry, let's consider alchemy's enduring influence. Even as alchemy faded, its legacy remained. Many of the laboratory techniques and equipment used by chemists were developed by alchemists. Picture that. The very tools we associate with modern science evolved from practices steeped in mysticism.
Alchemists, in their relentless pursuit of transmutation, stumbled upon elements like phosphorus, arsenic, and antimony. These discoveries, while not leading to the philosopher's stone, expanded our understanding of the material world. Ever wonder if they knew that it was important? From alchemy to chemistry, medieval labs evolved into modern research institutions. The alchemist's quest for transformation seeded the chemist's quest for understanding. The difference was not in the desire to manipulate matter, but in the methodology employed. Sure, alchemy was riddled with errors, but it laid the groundwork for a more scientific approach. Speaking of things we learn from, this brings us to alchemy's impact on the human imagination. Key takeaway: alchemy's failed quest left behind crucial tools and discoveries. So where does this leave alchemy? Even with its scientific shortcomings, alchemy captured the human imagination in a way that modern chemistry often fails to do. The idea of transmutation, of turning something ordinary into something extraordinary, resonates with our deepest desires for transformation and self-improvement. If you've ever wished for a miracle, you understand the enduring allure of alchemy. The symbols and metaphors of alchemy have also found their way into literature, art, and mythology. From the Harry Potter series to the works of Carl Jung, alchemy continues to inspire and inform our understanding of the human psyche. But what good is all this symbolism without a grounding in reality? As science progressed, it stripped away the mystique surrounding matter, revealing the underlying atomic structure of the universe. Alchemists believed in the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, as the fundamental building blocks of reality. But medieval people were wrong. The difference? We now know that matter is composed of atoms, which combine to form molecules, and that these atoms can be rearranged through chemical reactions. Sure, it wasn't as romantic as the alchemist's vision, but it was far more accurate. This brings us to modern science's view of the elements. Key takeaway: alchemy's metaphors and symbols continue to inspire art and literature. Now that we've established the scientific view, let's address the possibility of actual transmutation. Is it possible to turn one element into another? The answer, surprisingly, is yes, but not in the way the alchemists envisioned. Through nuclear reactions, scientists can indeed transmute elements, albeit at enormous energy costs. One can't help wonder, what would the alchemists have thought? The Large Hadron Collider, a colossal machine designed to probe the fundamental structure of matter, is a testament to our enduring fascination with transmutation. From the philosopher's stone to particle physics,
Human curiosity knows no bounds. The difference? We now have a far better understanding of the rules of the game. Sure, it's not magic, but it's pretty darn close. Speaking of magic, this brings us to the enduring impact of alchemy on the human imagination. Key takeaway: modern science has achieved transmutation, but not in the way alchemists imagined. So here we are, at the end of our alchemical journey. We've traced its origins, explored its methods, and witnessed its slow decline. But even as alchemy faded, its legacy persisted. It pushed us to ask, what if? It spurred scientific advancement, influenced art and literature, and continues to captivate our imaginations. Remember our old friend Paracelsus? As you drift off to sleep, perhaps you'll dream of bubbling retorts, hidden formulas, and the elusive philosopher's stone. Or maybe you'll just dream of finally getting a good night's rest. Either way, thank you for joining me on this historical adventure. Sweet dreams.